Hi everyone, in this episode we're going to be rigging the character that we made last episode. So let's make sure that the 3D cursor is centered in the scene, so remember that's Shift-C, and then just make sure we're in object mode. You can press Shift-A, and under Armature, just add in a single bone. Now let's quickly go into the Armature settings of here and just enable X-ray, so that the bones get drawn on top of the mesh. And then entering Edit mode with Tab on the bone, we can select the head of the bone here, and just move it up on the Z-axis to the base of the hips, and then let's move the tail of the bone, also on the Z-axis, just up to the middle of this joint here. We can then extrude this up on the Z-axis to the neck joint, and extrude that once more to the tip of the head. Now, you can see when we're working with bones, we've also got pose mode, which is what we use when we're actually animating the bones. So here we can see that by extruding these bones, we've been parenting them in a chain. So this one at the bottom here is the parent. You can see if we move this or rotate it, then all of the others follow. And then this is next along in the chain. So if we rotate this, then its child follows. And this doesn't have any children, so it just rotates on its own. So let's press Tab to go back into edit mode. And I'm going to left click on the shoulder joint here, Shift-A, that will add in a bone. And let's just drag the tail down to the elbow joint. We'll just want to align this from side view as well, something like that. And then let's extrude this out to the wrist, and once more for the hand. Let's then go down here for the legs. Shift-A, add in a bone, bring this down to the knee. Let's check this out from side view. Alright, extrude that down, and then extrude this for the foot. Okay, so if we go back into pose mode, we can see that since these two were added in as separate bones, they aren't parented to anything, so if we move the hips, they can just sort of wander off on their own. So going back into edit mode, we're going to want to select this upper leg bone, shift select the hip bone, and press Ctrl-P and make parent keeping the offset. We'll do the same thing with the upper arm bone, parenting that to the spine bone here. So Ctrl-P, keep offset. Now if we go into pose mode, you can see that the arms will follow the spine, and the legs and arm will also follow the hip bone. Let's quickly go through and name these bones. So we can do that in pose mode or edit mode, it doesn't matter. We'll just go onto the bone properties here, and let's call this hip. And then this is the spine bone, followed by the head bone. And then here we're going to have upper arm dot L, because it's his left arm. And then lower arm dot L. And just try to be consistent with this naming convention, dot followed by capital L. That will help us later on. So we'll call this hand dot L. Then upper leg dot L. Lower leg dot L. And finally foot dot L. Alright, now if we think about animating this character, say we want to create a simple walk cycle, you can imagine that the arms are pretty straightforward to animate because they just sort of swing in a simple arc. The leg is of course going to be much more difficult because it follows this complex path. Now we can make this a lot easier for ourselves when we're animating by creating what is called an IK, or inverse kinematics constraint, for the legs. So in pose mode here, I'm just going to select all of the bones and press Alt-R to just clear what I've done. And then let's go into edit mode, and we'll select the ankle joint here, and we're going to want to extrude out a little bone. This is going to be our leg IK bone. So let's name it here, leg IK dot L. And we're going to want to turn off the deform property, because this bone doesn't actually directly affect the mesh, but it's rather going to control the leg bones, which in turn will deform the mesh. So we don't want this bone to actually be parented to anything else, so let's press Alt-P and say clear parent. Going back into pose mode, we'll select the lower leg bone and then head over not to the Constraints tab, but to the Bone Constraints tab. And we can add in an inverse kinematics constraint, set the target to the armature and the bone to the leg IK bone. We also want to set the chain length to 2, which just means that this IK bone controls the 2 leg bones. So now if we grab the IK bone and just move that around, you can see we've got this nice IK action going on. Now, in case yours isn't working, one thing to make sure of is that in edit mode, the sort of knee joint is slightly bent. If it's completely straight or if it's bent the other way, then you'll have a hard time getting that to work properly. All right, so you can see that when we move this too far, it sort of flips around to the other side. Now, to prevent this from happening, we're going to add in what's called the pole target. So, in edit mode, we're going to left-click somewhere out here, level with the knee, and just press Shift-A to make this a more reasonable size. And I'm going to go into the bone settings here and call this pole target.L, and this is also not a deformation bone. So now in pose mode, you can select the lower leg bone, and back in the bone constraints, set pole target to armature and the bone to the pole target.L. Now, it might happen that your whole leg chain will rotate to some funny angle. So we can just select this lower leg bone and adjust the pole angle until that is back in line. So mine is at negative 90 degrees. All right. So now if we move this, you can see it behaves much better. And we can also control where the knee points by animating the pole target bone. Let me quickly clear what I've done here in pose mode by selecting all of the bones and pressing Alt-G. Now if we press Tab to go into edit mode, we're going to want to mirror the arm and leg bones onto the other side of the character. Now to do this, we're essentially going to be duplicating those bones and then scaling them by -1 across the x-axis around a central point. So let's press Z to go into wireframe mode so we can easily select these bones. Now you can see, oops, didn't mean to select the hip bone. You can see that by default, these will transform around the average of their positions, which is this point over here. So if I were to rotate it or scale it, they all move towards that point. Now we can change it so that instead of the transform point being the average of their positions, it is instead the 3D cursor. So if we press Shift-C to center the 3D cursor, and then press period, or the full stop key, that will change the point of transformation to the 3D cursor. So Shift-D to duplicate the bones, then right-click to cancel the sort of automatic move control that you get when you duplicate. We now press S to scale, X to scale around the x-axis, and then type in -1 to flip those across. Then hit Enter to confirm, and we'll now want to go onto the armature here, and we'll want to say flip names. Now because we were so strict with our naming convention of .L, it's picked that up, and on the other side here you can see it's changed it to upperarm.R. Alright, so our rig is now set up. All we need to do is make it so that if we're in pose mode and we rotate a bone, it actually affects the mesh. Now you can see it's currently still transforming around the 3D cursor, so let's press comma to change it back to its default setting. Now what we're going to do is we're going to select the character object and then shift select the bones and press Ctrl P, and we're going to parent with empty groups. So we'll see what this has done in a moment. For now, just make absolutely sure that you have the armature selected and that it is in pose mode, and then we're going to want to select the character and go over into weight painting mode. Now if you were in pose mode previously, you can see we are able to select the bones in weight painting mode, And if we go over here onto the mesh data, you can see that vertex groups have been added in with the same name as all of our bones. It's also important to note that the only names that are missing here are the ones belonging to the pull target and the IK bones. And the reason for that is, of course, that we specified them as being non-deformation bones. Alright, so let's start with the hips here. With that bone selected, we're going to press Tab to go into edit mode on the mesh. And let's deselect everything. And then just hovering over the hips here, let's press L to select that. And we can hit Assign. If we now press Tab, that will take us back to weight paint mode. And you can see that the hips are now red, showing that the hip bone has been assigned those vertices. We can now select the spine bone, and then once again press Tab, and let's just select this chest and the joint, and assign those, and repeat this process for all of the bones. So the upper arm, select that, and the shoulder joint, and assign. And what's cool is you'll see that this has been mirrored over onto the other side. So let's now go ahead and do the lower arm, assign that, then the hand, the leg, the lower leg, and finally the foot. Alright, so we should see that we can now control our rig very nicely, and that controls the character. Let's get out of weight painting mode by pressing Ctrl Tab, and then I'm going to select the armature, which is now in pose mode. And one thing that would be very nice is to be able to control the entire leg as well as the foot with just this single bone, but currently if we rotate this, nothing happens. So in edit mode, let's select the foot bone, shift select the IK bone, and press Ctrl P and parent with offset the foot to the IK. We'll do that with the right foot as well. So now back in pose mode, we can see that we can rotate the foot just by rotating the IK bone. Now this comes at a small cost. If we move the hips up, you can see that the legs can actually detach from the feet. This can of course be solved with a more advanced foot rig, but for now we'll just be careful when animating to make sure that the joint doesn't disconnect. Alright, another thing I'd like to do is to create a root bone so that we can easily move the entire character around. So with the 3D cursor at the center, I'm going to go into edit mode, press Shift A to add in a bone, and I'd just like to move this all the way down. I can hold down Control to make it snap in increments, so I can make it perfectly aligned with the ground plane. And then I'll just move this in, make it a little bit smaller. And we're going to want to parent the hip bone to this, so select that, Shift select the root bone, Control P, keep offset, and let's just quickly go and actually name this root and turn off the deform property for that as well. And then we're also going to want to parent both of the IK bones as well as both of the pull target bones to the root bone, so Control P and keep offset. Now, to get rid of all of these annoying lines that have filled our scene, we can press N, and let's just go up to the display options, if I can locate those, right here, and we can turn off relationship lines. Alright, that wasn't entirely successful, but they will be gone in pose mode, so that's something. So we can now see that moving the root bone around moves the entire character, with the exception of the ankles, which I seem to have somehow forgotten. So let me do this whole thing again, select the character, go into weight painting mode, select the feet, and let me just zoom in here so that I don't miss them. and going to want to assign this to foot.l. And okay, that one's been set up automatically now as well. Alright, we are very nearly done with our rig, just one thing left to do. So when we're animating, it's extremely helpful to be able to flip a pose from one side of the character onto the other side of the character, and we can do that by selecting the bones we want to flip, pressing Ctrl-C, and then Shift-Ctrl-V. Now, you can see it hasn't got it quite right, at least in my case. It may be different in yours. So what's going on here, if we go into edit mode, you can see that each bone, if we go into the bone properties, has got a roll value. Now, what we want to do is we want to let it automatically recalculate all of these roll values so that they're correct. So let's select all of the bones, and please make sure that you're in edit mode for this next step. We're going to press Ctrl-N, and of course if you're not in edit mode then this will load up a new file and you might lose all of your progress. So make sure you're in edit mode, and then let's recalculate the roll based on the view axis, which I have set to front at the moment. Click that, and what we should now see, if I just reset the bones in pose mode, is that if I repeat this process, Ctrl-C, Shift-Ctrl-V, it is pasting the pose correctly. It's quite possible that this process of recalculating the bone roll will have messed up your IK setup, as it has mine. So we'll want to go onto the lower leg bones and just give the pole angle its new correct value. It's a little bit hard to see what it should be when the foot isn't sticking out at an angle, since it is now parented to the IK bone. So what will probably be easiest is just to quickly grab the foot bone and parent that to the lower leg bone, and then in pose mode we've now got an easy indicator of what forward is, so it should be at 90 degrees now, and I'm going to assume that that is the same for the other leg, and then we can just go ahead and parent this back to the IK bone. So we're back where we were, but now our IK is working again. Alright, that's very nice. So we're going to leave this here, and in the next episode we'll be animating the character. Until then, cheers.